In this video, I'm going to share 5 things that are very confusing about nonprofits. Let's get into it. Hey there, this is Tiffany with Boss on a Budget. I help people start their nonprofits and also raise money for their new nonprofits. And I have a private community solely focused on helping new nonprofits raise money. So I wanted to share the things that trip people up about nonprofits, the things they tend to get wrong or they hear conflicting information about. I wanted to share some of that in this video. The first one is the confusion about the 509A1 and 509A2 subclassifications for nonprofits. Now, if you have not applied for 501c3 status, this probably is going to sound like gibberish to you. I'm linking a video above that sheds some light into this so you can have some background information. But also, I recorded a nonprofit startup masterclass, which goes into this in depth. And this is really important because it has implications for your organization in terms of its classification with the IRS. But I'll just say this: when people get approved for 501c3 status, they get the letter. They'll see in the letter that you're classified as a 509A1 or 509A2 organization, and they get really nervous about that because they're like, wait a minute, I wanted to be a 501c3. This is not what I signed up for. But what you have to understand is if you're classified as a 509A1 or 2, you are a 501c3 organization, and that's what that letter is confirming for you. But you may or may not remember that in the form you filled out, you have to declare how you're raising your money. And that's how the IRS is determining whether you're a 509A1 or 2, especially when you're using the EZ form, which most of you all are going to be filling out who watch this channel. There's a section of the 1023 EZ form that asks whether or not you get your money from one source or the other. And then there's a follow-up question which classifies whether you are a private foundation or not. So if you identify that you're a 509A1 or 2, it's saying you are a public charity. It's just you're getting your money in different ways. 509A1 is mostly from individual donors. 509A2 is a mix of income. You may be getting it from donors, but also earned income or other sources of money like membership that you decide to raise money with. So for example, you are a 501c3 museum, you're not just going to get money from donors. You may have a gift shop, you may have an interest fee. So you're more so fitted for A2 instead of A1. So that's just what to keep in mind. When you see that on the letter, it does not mean that you're not a 501c3 organization. It's a sub-classification of that. And it's just saying you're a public charity. And because you're a public charity, this is how you designated that you're raising your money, either this way or this way. Also keep in mind, because you're new, this doesn't mean much to you, but eventually when you start filling out the full 990 form, you're going to have to show the IRS that you actually are a public charity. They're going to want to see where your money is coming from. They're going to want to see that your money is coming from multiple sources, not just one person. And so you're going to have to pass some tests when you fill out the 990 form. There's one test called the public support test to prove that you really are a public charity. So you filling out the form, identifying whether you're A1 or A2 is kind of setting that up and letting the IRS know what to look out for. And they're confirming that when you submit your information in your annual tax form. Now, again, if this was all gibberish to you, I really recommend that you look up my nonprofit startup masterclass and purchase that. It's really worth the investment, or just look at the video that I'm linking above again. The second confusion is when everyone thinks that every nonprofit is a 501c3 nonprofit, and that's not the case. See, what people get mixed up is that they think that you become a nonprofit when you get 501c3 status, but you're actually a nonprofit before then. You actually have to declare that you're a nonprofit and then apply for 501c3 status. For those who do not know the process well, you have to incorporate in a state first, and then you declare to the state what kind of entity you are. And then you go to the IRS and say, well, we want to be tax exempt. We want to be a tax exempt entity. On top of us saying we're a nonprofit, and that's how we're organized in our state, we want to be a tax exempt nonprofit so that we don't have to pay income tax. And that's where the IRS comes in. But you start with the state, and a lot of people get confused about that. There are at least 27 other different 501c classifications in the U.S. federal tax code. 501c3 is typically used to classify those organizations that want to be charitable or organized for educational, religious, or scientific reasons. So most of you guys watching this fit as 501c3, and there are specific rules to maintain that status. But there are other 501cs too. There are 501c4s, 7s, 9s. Those are my favorite ones to call out because you have to keep in mind that nonprofit is a really broad term. People get so mixed up about this, but it's a broad term and it can refer to different kinds of organizations. It could refer to the PTA, the Parent Teacher Association. A nonprofit could be your homeowners association. A nonprofit could be your healthcare organization. So they're not necessarily organized for charitable reasons, but typically if it's a nonprofit, it's organized for the benefit of its members or is organized to benefit the public good. So that's typically why people start nonprofits. But if it's to benefit its members, then it doesn't necessarily have to have a charitable, cause or be designed to be charitable. It doesn't have to be. So that actually leads to point number 3. A lot of people think that to be a nonprofit, you have to be charitable, and that's not the case. You don't necessarily have to be. But if you're a 501c3 nonprofit, meaning you have applied to get 501c3 status with the IRS for your organization, then you likely do need to have a charitable reason or that fits the definitions in the U.S. federal tax code. So just keep that in mind. You want to look at those definitions and to make sure you fit if you want to get 501c3 status. But you could be an organization that is a sorority or, like I said before, your homeowners association. And you're not trying to help and save the world. You're just trying to make sure that your grass is cut in your neighborhood. You're just trying to make sure that people follow the rules to beautify your neighborhood. That's not a charitable reason, but you still get to avoid taxation because you're not necessarily benefiting yourself as an individual. You're benefiting a group of people. So that's what it's all about. Like, as a nonprofit, you have the benefit and the pleasure of being able to apply to be tax exempt because you're not necessarily operating like a normal business and you're saying to the IRS, I don't need to get taxed on that. So if you're a 501c3, well, I don't need to get taxed because I'm exist for a public good. But if you're like a membership organization, I don't need to get taxed because we're not doing this to make money. We're just doing this to satisfy our members. And we just need a way to collect money because we're not an individual organization. We're actually a business. Does that make sense? So just keep in mind that when people talk about nonprofits, and I get this sometimes on my channel when people go off on nonprofits and they say, this is what they're all about, all those things. People can have their opinions, but just keep in mind that when you use the word nonprofit, you're talking about a very broad spectrum of different types of organizations, and you got to be mindful of the kind of nonprofit you're talking about. Number 4 is a big one. People get confused about whether or not nonprofits can make a profit or whether or not nonprofit staff can be paid. So when I hear people say that nonprofit staff should not be paid or all nonprofit people should be volunteer, it really is a signal to me that that person does not really understand the vast number of nonprofits that exist in the world today. And there are nonprofits that you interface with every day that you probably don't realize is a nonprofit. And if you were to suggest that that organization not pay its people, or people just work for free, it would really be preposterous. So if you go into your local hospital and you're seeing a doctor or you're seeing a nurse, are you proposing that that person not get paid because they work for a nonprofit? Does that make sense? And this is not a far-fetched example. If your local college, are you suggesting that professors should just work for the college for free? And I think what trips people up is that they believe that nonprofits can't make money or they're only getting their money from grants or they can't charge for things. But think about your local doctor's office or your local college. They charge fees, they charge tuition. And this isn't a video to debate whether or not they should. The point is they can. And the point is that's how they're able to survive. An organization cannot be sustainable and continue on to do its work if it's not making money. And to me, that's not a debate. To me, that's just what it is. So when people believe that nonprofits should not earn money or should not have enough to pay staff well or run their organizations, that's just, again, a signal to me that they probably don't really understand the vast majority of nonprofits out there and how they operate. Foundations are nonprofits. So when you're asking for grant money from foundations, that's a nonprofit too. So there's so many different types of nonprofits. You just got to be mindful when you generalize. And again, this video is not a debate about whether or not, nonprofit staff should be paid a certain level or there are CEOs that get too much money. I'm not going to go into that debate because context matters. And too many people talk about things that they don't have a lot of information about, but they love talking up here without knowing all the details. We're not going to do that. This video or this platform is meant to lift up the people who want to do some good in their community, and they need the knowledge to do that. So we're not going to waste time arguing mindless arguments. We're going to get to work and give you the information you need to have clarity and do the work you need to do. And the last confusion that I see is that people are really confused at the difference between the IRS and the state, where they don't realize that the state has a lot to do with how you run your organization. So when I say the state, I just mean, and I'm talking about the US, the United States of America. I'm talking about each state. So before you start, you have to incorporate in one of the states. And that's when you declare whether or not you're a nonprofit organization. So the state is regulating your nonprofit business, not necessarily the IRS, because you could be operating for a minute at the state level and never get tax exempt status or never apply for tax exempt status. So you may not even engage with the IRS early on. That is a possibility. So just keep in mind that you also have to deal with the requirements of the state. And the state has a lot more requirements than the IRS does, because the state has a say in taxation a lot. So not just state income tax, meaning if you make money, whether or not they're going to make you exempt from paying income tax, but you may sell items. And so you have to remit sales tax that you collect on items that you sell. You may be providing a service and they may want you to put a tax on that. And so you have to keep track of that. You may be paying employees. So you have to have your unemployment tax account set up. It depends on the state though. Every state is different. There are so many different implications about what you do with property, or if you need a license to operate. All of that is regulated by the state government or the local or county government. So you need to be mindful of that. The other big thing is fundraising. That is regulated by the states. That is not regulated by the IRS. So you need to know what the rules are for fundraising in every single state. And there are some states who believe that when you have a donate button on your website, you're soliciting to their residents and they want you to register to be able to do that. So you got to get clear on what's required by all the states, honestly, and then know that that's separate from the IRS. The IRS comes into play when it comes to the money you make. They just want to know whether or not they need to tax you. So they need to know that you're operating as a nonprofit and you're operating as a tax exempt nonprofit according to their definitions. So they know not to tax you, but they still are going to keep tabs on you. They're still going to want you to submit annual forms so they know what you're doing. They know where your money's coming from and they know how you spend it. They also want to know who has control of the organization, who's making the major decisions, and are the people making decisions in cahoots with each other? Are they associated with each other? Are they making objective decisions? Because it's a really, really tall task and important responsibility to maintain the integrity of a public organization. So those are the kind of things they're interested in, because it really all flows back to the money and who's making decisions about how the money is spent, or if people are using the nonprofit as a way to funnel money from somewhere. They just want to keep tabs on that. All right. So I hope that was helpful. I hope that helped to clear up some confusion about nonprofits. If you have other suggestions for things you want me to talk about, let me know in the comments below. If you need help with your nonprofit, visit me at bossonabudget.com, and I will see you in the next video.